Hello, hello. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. I am super excited tonight because tonight I get to share with you all of my best practices and tips that I have learned from other teachers and that I have create. Some of them I have created myself. And the topic that we're going to be discussing today is something that is very important to me. And each year I just keep adding onto the repertoire of activities and tasks to do with my students just to make this entire experience even richer. So I'm really excited. And because I get to be here and it's just me today, we don't have a guest speaker today. I am going to take a little more time to share, to get a little bit more personal with you, if that's okay. So hello, Iram. And I have another person. Let me open my phone. And if you see me looking to my left a lot, it's because I'm looking at my phone and I'm trying to check. I'm trying to get used to checking if people ask questions and all of those things. So I'm still fairly new to doing this Facebook Live, so bear with me and thank you so much for your patience. And yeah, so today we're going to be talking about soaring student engagement through a proficiency mindset, which it has been a game changer in my classroom. And I know you have noticed that I use the word game changer a lot. And even though I use it a lot, I don't use it lightly. When I say something has been a game changer, I totally mean it. And this is one of those things that have changed the way I have interacted with my students, the way I have shaped my activities, and all of that. I'm trying to find my video on my Facebook group on my phone, but it's not popping up at this second. Oh, there I am. There I am. Now I can see who's saying what. Okay, so I'm going to be sharing my screen with you. You guys can already see it. And before I get started with the actual content, I am going to tell you a little bit about myself. You can see me in this picture. This is my first year teaching, guys. This is a picture from 2013 in August. That was when I started teaching, even though I received my degree in 2006, I did not start teaching until 2013. And that's a whole different story. But why I became a teacher? Well, to be honest, before I made the decision to go into teaching, I actually wanted to be an attorney. I wanted to be an attorney. And not many people know this because I don't really share it, because it doesn't really matter anymore, because I know that I'm in the right profession and this is where God led me to be. So, but the main reason why I became a teacher is while I was going to school and I was looking into possibly becoming an attorney, I ended up finding the education branch, or it found me. So I was able to do two degrees early on, 2 associate degrees, and I was able to do education as one of those associates. And that's when I got introduced to the profession, and I saw that I was able to really touch students' lives at a really young age when I was doing practicums and things of that nature. And I mean, from there, it just took off. Then I transferred to a college and I wanted to pursue something else, not law anymore, because I couldn't do law due to my immigration status at that time. Like I said, that's a whole different story. But yes, I ended up becoming a teacher, and then I ended up becoming a language teacher. And I love it. I absolutely love it, because I know that the teachers who shaped my life, I can remember every single one of them. And just as I'm telling you this right now, just thinking about them makes me want to cry, because they had such a profound impact in my life in different ways, especially my English language arts teachers. They were the ones who built the best relationships with me throughout my years. They gave me strength. They listened to me. I mean, I could go on and on and on, right? So like I said, I was going to get a little bit personal here, so I hope you don't mind. And so that's why I became a teacher, because I wanted to make a difference, and because I wanted to give the gift of language. That was the number one reason. I wanted to, language teaching in teaching our students to acquire language. It's, we just put so much of our heart into it, and it's like we put it in a package, in a beautiful package, and we want our students to receive it. And I know that every single one of you who's listening to me out there, you want to do what's best for your students. And if you're watching me today during your summer, this Wednesday at 6 p.m. Eastern time, whatever your time is, I know you want to do what's best for your students. So with that being said, I know we both have the same goals. We want to do what's best for our students, and we want to be able to give them that gift of acquiring a second language, perhaps showing them how it's possible to go for a third or fourth language. So I've been in the classroom for almost 7 years, not quite, because like I said, I started teaching in February 2013, and I've taught middle school for 2 years, and I taught high school for 4 years or so. So year 3 was the year where I had, I don't want to say an epiphany, but that's what it felt like. I was in my classroom, my students were compliant, I had a good rapport with my students, I had a good rapport with the parents, and I had excellent grades by the state evaluation system, and everything was fine. However, I knew in my heart that there was more to teaching Spanish than what I was seeing in the results that my students were bringing to me. So at that point in my life, I told myself, Berta, you either figure out a way to teach your students how you want them to really acquire this language, to give them the gift of language, or you get out of this profession. I'm just being real with you. That's what I told myself, because I knew that what was happening in my classroom, even though my classroom was orderly, even though my classroom was cute, even though I was doing everything by the book and I didn't have any issues, I knew that the results that I was seeing in my classroom were not enough for me as a professional. And I did not know where to start. I felt hopeless and helpless, to be honest. So what did I do? Thank God that we have the internet. Thank God that we have amazing Facebook groups and professional learning communities like this one, or like my friend Claudia's Growing with Proficiency, or like the IFLT NTPRS CI Facebook page. Thank God for those pages, because we can collaborate and we can help each other and we can share best practices that way, which is one of the reasons why I opened this space also. So year 3 was the year when I told myself, you figure it out and you keep pushing forward, or you decide if this is the career for you. And I really took it into prayer, and I really told God to show me that this was where he wanted me to be. Because it's not bragging about it, but I am led by faith. So that was the year when I started digging on the internet. And then, of course, just like many of you, found the Comprehensible Classroom blog by the amazing Martina Vex, or Miss Clases Locas blog, or the Creative Language class was actually the one that really taught me a lot. Not that the other ones didn't. Of course, everyone, played a part in that. But I started reading like crazy through these blogs and what they had to offer. And that's when I realized that, I needed to do some unlearning and some learning. And so what happened, I know that in 2012, we first saw the Proficiency Guidelines that were published by ACTFL in a little book. And actually, I have the book, but it's not right next close to me. And around that time, that's when that happened. And I knew my state was talking about it, but I just wasn't very familiar with it. And I really didn't think that was such a big deal. And I'm being honest, like I said. All honesty right here, all real is what you're going to get tonight. So I had no idea what the proficiency guidelines were. I heard the word can do at the meetings and at the conferences, but I was not really involved in all of that. And then I read a blog by the Creative Language class that was talking about the proficiency guidelines and bring the rubric to life. So I clicked on that. And that's when I first adopted their model to bring the rubric to life in my classroom. So first, a long time ago, I just had a line, just like a line, and in my wall. And I thought that line was, I put that line there because I needed to have, that's what people were talking about, bringing the rubric to life. I wanted to have that in my classroom. And thank God thank God that I started making references to that. And I thought it was just there, to show something, but I actually had it there. This was 4 years ago, by the way. So it was there, and I was starting to make reference to it, and then I started learning more about it, and then I got curious, and then I started reading more of ACTFL, and then it kind of like clicked. So now, then I switched that timeline, and then I made it into a bulletin board in the class. So I have had this same. I mean, actually, I have 4 bulletin boards in my classroom. I know. I'm blessed, right? So, but this bulletin board, because my classroom is very large, but this particular bulletin board right here has been in my class for, I want to say 3 years, like this. It was first there, like I said, as a one solid line, just like this, but it's been there for 4 years. And I love this proficiency board because it is very simple. The students can read it once I show them how to read it. And then they can just take off from there. And I don't just leave it there for it to be there the whole year. I actually point at it and make references to this bulletin board throughout all of our activities in the class, throughout our formative and summative assessments in the class. So the first thing I want to tell you about soaring student engagement with proficiency is that if you don't have a bulletin board that talks about proficiency in the classroom, if you are going back to school this year, you get one of these, and it is very easy. And I'm going to give you 2 links right here because I'm going to share this PowerPoint with you. And right here you have, if you want to get the same module I have, which is only going to be this printables, the lines I kind of like created myself, you can print it over here from the Creative Language class blog post. Or if you want to get another model from the Georgia Department of Education, they have a PDF that you can print on different color paper, and you can kind of like slap together your proficiency bulletin board for your students to have. So I wanted to ask the audience tonight, you guys, if you have a proficiency board in your class, or if you have had one in the past, can you just tell me yes or no, so that I know that my friend Maribel is watching right now, and I know she has one. And then I wanted to know if anybody else, if you could just tell me, yes, I have one, no, I don't have one. I would love to hear about it. But this is the first thing. Before I even talk to my students about proficiency, I set up my class space. And there are several key elements that I adapted throughout the years and the last 2 years, and I have just kept it. And because it works, because it's done wonders for me, and it's done wonders for my students as well. So please, if you don't have one, I honestly want to invite you to adopt one in your classroom. And like I said, it's already done for you. So all you have to do is go print out the stuff and then put it on your classroom. And not just leave it there for everybody to see, actually use it throughout the year. And I'll show you and I'll tell you how I use it. So I see a lot of people have one, and some people say they don't have one. So if you don't have one and you have your own class, I highly suggest you get one. If I were to go back to school remotely, I would still make reference to this bulletin board during my first week of class, and I will still do a lot of the things I'm going to show you today. I will tweak them because they can be tweaked, and I will use them to show my students what my class is about. So this is like tip number 1 for classroom space. The second tip I want to share with you today is this little poster, and I promise you that I'm not getting any commission for selling any of the stuff that I'm showing you. This is the only thing that has a price, and you don't have to go buy it. You can create your own. You can have a student who writes really pretty, because I don't write pretty, so I have to get my students to make my posters. But I actually bought this poster at the IFLT conference 2 years ago, and I have it in my classroom ever since, actually 3 years ago. And it says, when acquiring another language, first we learn to listen, we learn to read what we've heard, we learn to write what we read and heard, and finally we speak because we've heard, read, and written it. So I kind of tell my students a story about how I acquire English. And I'm going to give you like the 1-minute version of it, because I give my students a much longer version of it. But you guys, I'm going to give you the 1-minute version of it. I came to the United States when I was 11, and I obviously didn't know any English. So the way I taught myself English there was no English as a second language program in my school, and I taught myself by reading. So I am a believer of silent sustained reading, or FBR, whatever you want to call it, because that's how I learned English in 1 year. In 1 year, of course, I was immersed in the language, but the language was not comprehensible to me in the classroom. So, Dr. Krashen told me when I met him in February, I need to write a case study on myself, and I'm going to do it eventually, but I'm going to do it. So I learned English through reading, and I learned English also through listening to comprehensible messages. But yes, I told my students that how I learned the language, and I make a connection. I tell them a story about that. I do this in English, by the way. All of this that I'm talking about right now, I do it in English. And I am willing to make that investment the first week of school because it pays huge dividends along the way. So I tell them a story about how I learned the language, and then I explain to them what this poster means. And then I do something else. So this is a second part of my classroom space. This poster is very special to me because the students can understand second language acquisition with this poster alone. Okay, so the other thing I want to share with you is these beautiful posters that I also have in my classroom, and these ones are from Miss Clases Locas, and you can get yours for free because this is a free product. She has kindly, allowed all teachers to download. It's completely free, and it's the can-do statements for the communication modes. So I also explain to my students. This stays on my wall all the time. So this stays on my board all the time, and it supports the students' language acquisition experience. So every time that I'm doing an activity in the class, so I talk to them about second language acquisition with that other poster, and I tell them my story, and then as we go on in the next couple of weeks, I explain to them the modes of communications, and I said, okay, we're going to be learning, and in this class you're going to be doing these types of activities, and I break it down for them, and I tell them we're going to be reading a lot about whatever topics I decide to read with them according to their level. And I said, that's called an interpretive reading activity. So when we're listening about the stuff that we read, or when we're listening to a Spanish song, or when we are listening to a movie, or we're listening to someone talk or say something, that is an interpretive reading activity. So I break down the modes of communication with them, and my students can totally nail those. Like, they understand, and because they're high schoolers, and this would work for 7th and 8th graders. I taught middle school. I don't know if it will work as well for 6th graders, but I know 7th and 8th graders will also get it if you're a middle school teacher and you're listening to me. I break down the modes of communications for them, and I tell them I talk to them about input, and I talk to them about output. So I break that down for them as well. So I use all of my visuals to break that down for them as well. And then I also use the sponge analogy, where I get a sponge from the Dollar Tree, and I get a bottle of water, and I put a little bit of water, and then, I said, okay, this is going to be the input, and then nothing's coming out of the sponge. So they need more input, and nothing's coming out of the sponge. And you can see, because if you get the huge sponges that are $1 from the Dollar Tree, the yellow ones to wash cars, you got to put a lot of liquid in there for stuff to come out. And I grab a bucket, of course, to not make a mess. And then I show them, how they need a lot of input, that's the sponge is their brain, and they need a lot of input to produce output. So that's another practical thing you can do with your students in the first week to show them how second language acquisition works. You do not have to go into detail. I mean, I do talk about Dr. Krashen a little bit, but in the sense that, like, he is somebody I admire, and this is the person I read about. Your students need to know that you are the expert in their classroom so that they can trust you. And I'm talking about this because, I teach high schoolers. And because of that, that is very important. When the teacher can show them that they know, and they can lead them on the journey of learning, acquiring a language. And the reason why I'm saying this is because we know that our students come to our classroom with different previous experiences. So I cannot blame it on the teacher they had before me, whether it was a teacher in my building or whether it was a middle school teacher that probably gave them a great or not so great experience. I cannot blame whatever my student is bringing into my classroom on that teacher. That just, I can't do that. I cannot dwell on that. So I just have to move forward and talk to the students about second language acquisition and establish a brand new relationship. So if the student had a previous negative experience with language, I try to make it so that I break that off the first week of school and I establish myself, okay, this is a new class and this is nothing like you ever done before. So yes, so I use these posters and they stay in my classroom all year. And every time we do an activity, I walk to the board and I said, okay. And then, later on I say it in Spanish, but at the first weeks I do it in English and then I transition to Spanish. But, I said, what type of activity is this? And then they tell me what type it is. So I continue that second language acquisition language and the communication modes throughout the entire year. It doesn't stop just at the beginning of class. Then I go on to a mini lecture series. This is what I do the first week of school. So the first week of school, I have two main objectives. I am norming the class, and then I'm also letting the students get to know me as a person. And we're doing stuff in the target language, absolutely, yes. And then I'm teaching them about second language acquisition and things such as performance versus proficiency. And I do a little mini lecture. So every day for X amount of minutes, I deliver, a little lecture piece about second language acquisition. So I explain to them the difference between performance and proficiency using these two slides right here. This is just a sample, and I basically break it down for them. I'm not going to read them for you, but I pretty much tell them, performance means this and proficiency means that, and I go into detail about it briefly, but I do give more details and examples, and then my students, can kind of think about it, and then maybe I might give them an exit ticket to tell me what they understood from that. So that's on a different day. This takes about a whole week to do. I don't do it everything all at once. So the other thing that I do is that I make reference to the course's goals. So in the syllabus, and this might not be the clearest picture, but in the syllabus, I have what is our goal for our class. So for example, for my Spanish 2 class, the goal is to reach intermediate low. And for my Spanish 3 class, the goal is to reach intermediate mid. Some people are going to reach it. Some people are not going to reach it. Some people are going to go beyond it. That's just the reality of the learners we have in our classes. So how, we have to acknowledge that our learners are going to be at different levels. And you know what? This is nothing new. The math teacher can tell you they have learners at different levels. And then we have to focus on what learners can do and not on what they cannot do. And then someone asked me a question today about grading. How do you grade your students? I use different rubrics for a task. So for example, if I know in my class, I have students who are novice high, intermediate low, and intermediate mid, and I have a heritage speaker who's advanced low, I have a rubric for each of those. And I will use that to grade the students. I'm not going to grade my novice low with an intermediate mid performance rubric. That's unfair to the child. Again, that is my opinion. I'm not saying I'm the expert here, but that's how I like to do it because I like to be fair to my student. We know that students will reach different levels of proficiency for different reasons. We know some students are more ready than others to learn at a faster pace as well. So for that reason, I grade my students based on their growth, and I tell them at the beginning of the school year, I said to them, this is the suggested point that we need to reach, but you can go beyond. Or maybe if you are novice low, because believe it or not, I had students in Spanish 3 who are very novice low. We are going to try to make it all the way through novice high. And you know, so I have to be real with them, and I have to be being real with them is the same as being as making it safe for them to trust me with their learning journey. Okay, so we're gonna go to the next part, mini lecture series. So again, I talk to them about performance and proficiency. I talk to them about the course's expectation that is on their syllabus, and I break it down for them. And then the next thing that I do is I talk to them about the actual proficiency guidelines. And these are very, I'm sure you have seen these two visuals in here. This one is from Joshua Cabral, the World Language Classroom, and you can get a PDF from him that looks like this if you've never seen this one before. If you click on the link right here, and as always, I'm going to give you the PowerPoint for this. And then you can also click on this one to get the one for Clark County School District. I found it online, and the link is right here. So I really like either one of these two, are pretty amazing. And you can print one of these, give it to your students. And what I do is I break down the novice low, novice mid, and novice high for them. Like I go through the process of breaking it down, and we look at the different language in between. And that way they understand what it means to be novice low, what it means to be novice high or novice mid, and what they can do to level up. So I'm going to pause right now because I have a couple questions right here. Do you create your own rubrics for heritage learners, or where can I find them? Nelva, I am working and I got a million things on my shoulder, but I am working on making sure that I can share somehow some rubrics with you guys. So I'll be in touch with you about that probably towards the end of the month, okay? And then Iram, can we have access or share rubrics that we all have for each mode of communication? I have a few I could share. Iram, if you want to create a folder and share with people, absolutely, by all means, you can do that. Claudia say that's incredible, having high expectations for honoring their growth. Yes, Claudia, you know that's what it's all about. I know you do, because we had amazing conversations about this. That is, Madeline is saying that is a challenge for me because my administrator would like for teachers to use the same assessments, the final exam. Oh, yes, you are going to use the same assessment. You can use, I mean, like sometimes I differentiate assessment, but not all the time. And I will kind of like touch on that a little bit more in this presentation. So we were talking about how this is important for the students to know, especially at the high school level. They have the ability to reflect on this material. And if you present it to them in a way that they can understand it, they're going to keep it. And I'm telling you this because I know, because I have seen the results in my students in the last 3 years. And how I have gone from seeing just improvement from applying this to actually having my students take off, graduate, and go and continue to learn the language, even if they're not in college. Okay, because I have one who went to college, but that didn't work out for him, but he's still learning the language. And he sent me a message the other day, and he just like, hey, can you create videos with me on Instagram so that I can practice Spanish? Sure, why not? So the other activity that I do with the students, I go from having mini lecture series to having student-centered tasks. So the first student-centered task that I do is called keywords. So you can get a copy of this activity. It's linked to this presentation, and it's not this activity that you see the students here doing. The keyword activity actually happens before they do this poster. So the keyword activity is I give them the document, one of these two that I showed you, and then I give them the document, and then I give them this document, and this is an activity they're going to work on independently or collaboratively. So the first part, the first square right here, it says, as you read the document independently, jot down as many key powerful words that stand out to you on a list. So right here on this blank space, independently, they're going to read, if they're novice, they're going to read that part, and they are going to write down keywords, a lot of them, as many as they can. And they're only focusing on one topic being novice, intermediate, or advanced. And if the student is novice, they're focusing on novice. If the student identifies as intermediate, they are going to do the intermediate. And if the student identifies as advanced, they're going to do the advanced. So they write the keywords, and then independently, they narrow their list by selecting 3 words from those that are like the main thing. And then finally, they find somebody else. They find 2 other kids or 2 other students who are also at their level. And then they write a brief group summary of what it means to be novice. So this is just a little activity so that I'm not talking to them forever and I don't go one by one. This is what it means to be novice. This is what it means to be intermediate. This is what it means. No, they don't want to hear that. If the student, can use their brain to make their own conclusions and you're just supervising, that's how they're going to learn what the proficiency levels, what the performance descriptors are really all about. So this is an activity I do, keywords, before we do the poster. And before we even do the poster, we do something else. So this is another activity that I do with the classes to help them understand the performance descriptors, okay? So the next activity that I do, and this is kind of sad for me to talk about it because I'm not going to be able to do this activity this way when we go back to school. Even if I go back, I know as far as my city goes, we're going back to school, to the building. But even going back to the building, I'm not going to be able to do this activity. So there are several activities I want to share with you. So first, the one that I actually learned from the amazing Meredith White was to have the students listen to samples of English language learners and have them analyze the speaking sample and determine if the learner is speaking at a novice, intermediate, or advanced level. So this is what I do. And you can have, if you click over here, you will get a link to all of the videos several videos from ACFL of people who are speaking in English. They're English language learners, and you can rate them as intermediate, as novice, or advanced. So you play the video. Don't project the video, because if you project the video on the screen is going to say novice, and you don't want your students to see it. So you just want to project the sound and let the students hear it. And you have 2 choices. So I'm going to tell you the first choice. The first choice, you can tell your students to write the proficiency rating on their dry erase board. I like to do it on the dry erase board because anytime I can go to the dry erase board to avoid grading, we'll do activities on the dry erase board. You can have them do it on a sheet of paper, but I don't like to, I'm trying to stay decluttered throughout the school year. So dry erase board it is. So you have them write in the dry erase board, novice, intermediate, or advanced. You have them listen to the clip, and then they have to tell you if that person was speaking at novice, intermediate, or advanced. And then you call on a random student and tell them, why do you think that is? Make it really safe for them to answer. And then they're gonna say, okay, I think it is novice because of X, Y, and Z. And then you tell them if it was novice or not, and then you move on to the next example. I usually do about 5 or 6 examples of these so that they have an idea what people sound like when they're learning English, because that's why they sound like to us as teachers when they're learning Spanish, and that's how we know what level they're at. So another variation of this activity is, if you see in this picture of my classroom right here, I had 3 lines, and this is why I'm saying I get sad, but I changed it up this year a little bit because I wanted a little bit more movement. So I put novice in here, intermediate in here, and advanced in here, and I had all the students at the front of the class, and they just had to walk to the correct line when they heard the person speak. They had to walk to the line that thought was the correct rating. So again, probably not going to be a best practice for this year because this activity does not really promote social distancing, right? So this is another activity that you can do to help the students understand what a novice learner sounds like, what an intermediate learner sounds like, and then what an advanced learner sounds like. And Carol is saying, explaining how they learn encourages buying. Yes, absolutely, especially among our high schoolers. This is the other activity. It's a collaborative task, and the students create a poster after we've done all of that. they create a poster and they present on a proficiency range. So my students who are novice, I don't allow more than 3 people per group because you know how that goes. But my students who are novice, they'll get together. So if I have 6 novices in Spanish 2 or 9 or 12, that's going to be, several groups of novice who are doing a novice poster, and that's fine. And then they're going to be giving me characteristics of novice learners, their overall definition, group definition of novice learners, and then they're going to tell me how they can level up to go on to the next level. And they have to give me a little picture with an example of a conversation that would happen at the novice level. So it's a very simple activity. All you need, honestly, like I don't have rubrics for this. I don't have instructions for this. I just tell them how I want it done, and they do it. It's, I give them a poster paper and I give them all the markers they need, and they do it, and they have so much fun discussing the material. And don't be surprised if you have certain students will want to know more, especially your heritage speakers. And then some of your students would like to know more. So if that's the case, you can give them a link to the actual website that has like a lot more in-depth explanation, because I actually had 2 students last semester who read through that and came up with much better posters. So I'm reading over here. Maybe they can hold up 1, 2, or 3 fingers for novice, intermediate, or advanced online. Yes, that is an excellent idea, Ronetta. That's an excellent idea for online. So here are some more examples of what that poster ended up looking like for intermediate, and then what it looked like for the advanced. And I thought they did a great job. And again, you don't have to grade everything. They thought I graded this. They thought I graded this activity, but no, it did not go in the grade book. But it was a beautiful activity, and they learned so much about it. I think it is a really good use of time, because it teaches the student to begin to think about what it is they need to learn in your class. And it teaches the student to start thinking about what they need to be looking forward to make it to the next level. So here's my summative. After I do all of that with my students, and we do other things, like I said, this is pretty much what I do as far as like proficiency and instilling that mindset at the beginning of the year. After I do all of that, I give them a summative, and this one is a grade on the grade book, and it is an assessment grade on the grade book. So they have to do a flip grid presentation, and this is what the presentation looks like. And they have to summarize the difference between performance and proficiency, distinguish input from output, differentiate the communication modes, and self-assess their current proficiency range and why do you think you're there, and then set their personal proficiency goal while in class. Now, you may think that maybe this sounds like a lot of teacher language, but by the time they get here, they know all this terminology. And that's why this is an assessment. They understand my language. They're speaking my language as far as second language acquisition goes. And what happens in this process is that the students go from seeing you as a teacher, and they see you more as a facilitator, as a coach, as a mentor. And the conversations and the mindset goes from, oh, I'm just here to get an A, to like, what can I do to get better? Oh my God, why did I not make it all the way to intermediate low? I really thought I performed at intermediate low. Please tell me what I need to do to get to the intermediate low. I think I know I need to do this, that, and the other, but what was I missing, Ms. Delgadillo, that kept me from getting that intermediate low? The conversations will change in your classroom. So I highly suggest these activities for that. And then I want to show you 2 examples if you want to see my students' products, and I do have their permission to share. So if you would like to see what they said, can you just type yes and I'll play it? It's like a minute each. Do you want to see their final product for their summative? Just you can type on the little chat box if you want to actually see it. If not, I'll go on to the next slide. Okay, somebody said yes, so I'm going to do it. And please let me know if you can hear it, because well, hold on one second. Let me go Yes, yes, yes. Okay, awesome. Let me go to, I'm gonna have to get out of this presentation because it is linking it, but it's not opening the video. So if you can give me a couple seconds and I will get the videos. Thank you for your patience because this technology is to be expected. Let me see. Okay, I think I got it. And I'm going to share. So again, they're not going to tell you as teachers. Theirs is not going to be perfect, but it's going to be pretty close. It's going to be pretty great what they come up with. Thank you for your patience, guys, because it was not going to play it from the other tab that I was using. So
there are two types of activities, input and output.
Please let me know if you can hear it.
Is taking in information, such as reading or listening.
Can you hear it?
Is an activity where you are giving out information, such as talking or writing. In Spanish, there are two types of output, performance and proficiency. Performance is an output where you are in a set situation like a classroom and using basic skills you've already learned. Proficiency is talking in a social setting or in the outside world, like ordering from a menu or talking with a friend. There are three types of communication. Interpersonal, which is having basic conversation.
That's as loud as it can go, Carol. I'm sorry.
Where you are reading or listening and translating. And presentational, with no back and forth and saying one set thing. When it comes to my proficiency, I believe I'm a novice mid to high when it comes to listening and reading, but when it comes to speaking, I'm in between a novice mid and novice low.
Okay, so that's one example. Let me see if I can show you the other example that I had, if I can find it really quickly.
In Spanish,
here's the other example, and hopefully it's a little bit louder.
So
or maybe not.
Performance and proficiency is kind of sort of like practicing before a big show. When performing, you're basically practicing behind closed doors to get ready for the show. And proficiency is taking what you practice out to the real world, which is the big show in front of everybody. Input is what you hear or see, and output is what you get out of what you heard or saw, such as reading a book or a paragraph or an article and basically summarizing it into your own words. Interpersonal is when you're talking to one or more persons or people, I guess fluently, I want to say. Interpretive is like how well you understand the things, and presentational is how to speak to anybody. I would have to say for my proficiency level, when listening, I'll give it like a novice medium, and when speaking it, I would say novice low.
Okay, so these students were, this was at the beginning of my Spanish 2 course at the beginning of last year. I just kind of wanted to share with you like what it looked like in their own words, because I think sometimes student examples can describe things better than I can as a teacher. So yeah, that's how they were able to explain to me in their own words. And I thought it was pretty impressive how this young lady over here said, well, performance is kind of like when you're preparing for the big show, and then, proficiency is the actual big show. So she made her own, she created her own connection to what performance and proficiency was for her. So understanding this from the very beginning of your class, we cannot assume that the students come already knowing this information, because they don't. So I always do it at the beginning of the class, even Spanish 3, even Spanish 4. I may not do the same sequence of activities, but I definitely do these activities because I want all my students to be my team players, to be the team players in my classroom, because we have to play the game, and we have to play the game right, and we have to score big, right, which is fluency. So what is next after I talk to them about proficiency the first week, and we instill that on our mindset, and we know what all those things that I did not know as a teacher meant 4 years ago. And now I can actually articulate this to my students, and my students can teach each other about this. We do a lot with this. We don't just talk about it at the beginning of the year. We continue on. So the week after that, what I do with all my classes, and I use the example from Spanish plans to level up my students. So I kind of teach them what it looks like to level up their sentences, and how to make their sentences longer, and how to do connecting sentences, and how to do more complex sentences. So we do those types of activities in the next couple of weeks, so that the students feel able to, they at least have an idea of what is expected from them when they see that they need to be able to create simple and simple sentences and complex sentences. They have to know what those look like. So I like to do this activity with them because they receive modeling of how we need to be leveling up our sentences. They can also visualize what is possible in their writing and in their speaking. And all students can do the level up challenge, and that's what I call it, level up challenge, at different levels. So if a student is novice mid, they can still level up. And if a student is at intermediate low, they can still level up. Their level up is going to be different, but we're doing the same thing. It's just different, something different. They're each going to have a different product in the end. So it gives the student ownership. It increases the quality of what the students can produce, and it helps them look towards achievement and celebrating achievement later on in class. The next thing that I want to share with you as I wrap this up, sustaining the proficiency mindset throughout the year. I cannot emphasize enough how it is to me very important to instill this at the beginning of the year, and to make that one entire week investing in this at all levels, Spanish 1 all the way through AP. But it's also just as important to sustain that proficiency mindset throughout the year. And here are some ways that I do this. So throughout the year, when we're taking an assessment, or when we're doing a summative or a formative, or we're writing in the class, I always go to this board and I said, okay, if you're intermediate low, this is what you need to work on. If you're intermediate mid, this is what you need to work on. And I read from the bulletin board, but I also add what I know. And I give them a little bit more coaching. So I kind of give them group coaching from this board, and I'm talking to students who are at different levels. So the activity might be the same, but their performance is going to be different, because I cannot demand a baby who came to my class with novice low to be performing an intermediate mid. That's just not fair to that child. However, I can maintain high expectations, because the expectation is growth. And the expectation is to grow as much as you possibly can while you're in my class. And that's what I tell my students. So I use the board to reference it when we're doing assessments, so that and I tell my students, okay, think about this. If you want to do intermediate mid, if you're going to be performing intermediate mid, think about this. Did you do this? Did you do that? And just kind of like, it's a little hype chat that I have with them using this board. And then the other thing that I do, like I mentioned, I always ask them what type of activity or what type of task is it that it's taking place. Is it going to be an interpretive listening, interpretive reading, or is it going to be an interpersonal or a presentational? So we always keep that in check. Another way that I maintain and sustain this throughout the year is to have an opportunity for the students to self-assess their work. And I embed this self-assessment moments in the class. Sometimes it could be in the form of a simple question, or I can do it in the test. If we're doing an exam or a summative assessment, I will have a question in there that says, based on the feedback or based on your performance, what are your goals for your next performance, something to that effect. Another thing that I do when we do writing, or when we do like a presentational speaking or a presentational writing or an interpersonal speaking, we do goal setting. I give my students to tell me the opportunity to tell me how many words they want to write at what level, what they're shooting for. And they usually excel that. And that is amazing because they can show themselves, they push themselves. If they go beyond what they said they were going to do, they're pushing themselves, and that is to be celebrated. And then the other thing that I want to share with you is that I have the lesson learning targets at the beginning on my agenda. I have the lesson learning targets, and I use, this is language from the standards, from the Georgia standards, because my administration wants to see the Georgia standards on the learning targets on the board. So I use the Georgia standards to make them happy. Nothing bad about my admins, they're great. But I want to keep my job too. So I use the standards they want me to use. And then my students understand exactly what this means. So, but on the activities that my students receive, on the worksheets or on the tasks that my students receive, I might have in a even a more student-friendly form, the learning targets, what it is that they need to, what are they working towards by doing this activity? So they know that in my class, Ms. Delgadillo is not just going to keep them busy. They're actually going to be doing something that's related to moving up on what we're working towards at that specific unit. So that really works wonders for me. And why I continue with this practice, why is it that I continue with this practice? Like I said, I started doing this about 4 years ago. And the reason why is because, like I said, establishes trust among the learners. The learners learn to trust you, and they see you as their coach, as their mentor. And like I said, the conversations about the grades are going to be so different. It sets up the learning atmosphere for risk taking, and we know how important that is for second language acquisition. Students have to be willing to take risks to go to the next level, and they should not be penalized for making mistakes. We can tell them, we can point those mistakes, or what we think are mistakes, we can point that out for them and coach them through it, but the conversation has to be a little bit different. So learners will view you as their facilitator. I already mentioned that, and they will become invested in acquiring language beyond your course. And I'm not going to tell you that every single one of your students will become invested beyond your course, but I'm telling you, I have seen how my students have become invested. Each year, the number goes up more and more on how many students decide to become fully bilingual, even after they take my Spanish 3 course, because in my school, we have Spanish 1, 2, and 3, and then AP. But our AP program competes with the Move On When Ready program, which is a program where the high schoolers, as early as in like their junior year, they can go ahead and enroll in college classes. So that's kind of a no-brainer for the students because this is going to save them money. So with that being said, even if they only come to me for Spanish 3 and they reach intermediate mid or intermediate high and then they leave, they can still continue on that journey because I have given them the tools necessary for them to know what it is they need to do to get to the next level on their own. And it's happened. So instead of what's another reason why I continue to do this practice? It's because it sets up the students to self-differentiate. So I can tell you a lot about differentiation. My friend Angela Williams, who is watching right now, Angela, hello, and myself, we're gonna be doing a presentation on differentiation in the classroom, and but not in this group, but we're gonna be doing one, and we can give you a lot of tips on that. But my favorite way to differentiate is allowing the students to, pick the level they're working towards. So the product is going to be different. Even though the product and the assignment is the same, the product ends up being differently. And these are just some examples of that. So in here, they are doing summaries for a book, and everybody's text, everybody's words is different because they're all at different levels. And then in the middle, they were doing a Venn diagram. And as you can see, the student is probably more in the novice range. The student is more in the intermediate range. And this student, who's not a heritage speaker, is all the way, she is something else. So she definitely is an amazing student. And not that the other ones aren't. The other ones are just as great because they're all pushing themselves to perform. And same for this other last example. It's a storyboard of one of the stories from Senor Woolley. And as I was doing the retail for the storyboard, I told my students, if you are at the novice range, you can just write what you can hear me say as best as you can. And if you are at the intermediate low range, then you can kind of like change some words around, change the story around. And then I told them, if you are anywhere in the intermediate high or advanced range of my heritage speakers that I may have in Spanish 3, you can rewrite the whole story, and I expect you to rewrite the whole story. And then I always say, if you're novice and you want to try to rewrite the story, please, by all means, go ahead. These are just the suggestions, but ultimately, this is choose your own route. So they end up with I end up with a lot of different products from just one assignment. And it's pretty amazing to see what they can produce when you give them so much freedom. So enough of me telling you about this. I want to let my students tell you how they feel about using proficiency in the classroom to guide our instruction and to talk to them and teach them about proficiency. I want to read a couple of comments from my students. This is from a survey at the end of the year. One of my students said, she made me want to actually finish the class because at first I was like, I'm not doing this, but the way she pushes you isn't like any other teacher. So this student, she did not want to be in my class at the beginning. And then when she felt that it was safe and she felt that I was going to be right with her every step of the way, she just, we have a great relationship. And she was really sad that she didn't get to finish the class with me at the school, and she ended up having to do it online. The other student said, I think having a better grasp of where you are at and will better help you know what skills you need to work on to move forward. These proficiency levels are the perfect marker for those skills. And then I have another student who said, yes, not only did I use proficiency levels in my class, but it was also very helpful in other areas of education. It impacted me personally because I would constantly think about what I can do to move up a level. So yes, and I can go on and on and on and read all these comments from my students, but they absolutely love this unit on proficiency the first week of school. And I love it because, like I said, it's like we're a big team, and they trust me and they know that we're going for the win. So I hope these ideas were helpful to you. Thank you so much. Susanna is asking, where will you be doing the differentiation webinar? Susanna, I'm going to be doing it for Fluency Matters, and I will post the information on that because the webinar isn't free, but I will post it on my group because I'm doing it for Fluency Matters, and it's going to be me and Angela Williams. Angela is going to focus on middle school students and lower level students, and I'm going to focus on high school students for differentiation. So thank you so much. And if you are not in my emailing list, I know many of you are in my emailing list, but I want to invite you to get in it because that way I can tell you about the webinars that are coming up. If I'm not doing something inside this group, I email people every Monday to let them know what's going on. I invite you to go to my website, which is profesoradelgadillo.com, and then you see this image right here. You can put your name and email address, and then you'll be getting emails from me. And if you want to discontinue the email relationship, you can always unsubscribe. But I promise you, I will send you useful information. And sometimes I send freebies. I haven't sent freebies in a while, but I will be doing that from time to time. Thank you so much for your time. I hope this was helpful to you. And I look forward to seeing you next Wednesday. Next Wednesday, we have an amazing presenter, guys. We have Megan Buck, and she's coming here to talk to us about grading with proficiency in mind. And I don't know about you, but that is something I can get totally better at. She is amazing at this. So if you need help with grading with proficiency in mind and how to set up your grade book, please make sure to be here next Wednesday at 6 p.m. She's going to tell us all about it. Remember, you can always catch the replay and there's nothing wrong with that. But if you want to ask questions live, that's what the lives are here for. So next week, don't miss it, because this one is grading with proficiency in mind, and she is going to walk us through how to set up our grade books. So thank you so much for joining me tonight. I am really glad that to hear all the comments about how much you have enjoyed this presentation. It is my absolute pleasure. These are all ideas, and you take them and use them if you find them useful. And I'm going to be putting the presentation on my Facebook group and in the comments, and also on the files, and you guys can download it and you guys can click on everything that I mentioned that was there available and ready for you to take advantage. Have a great evening, guys. Take care.